They said she was cursed from the moment she drew breath. Born in silence, hidden behind thick stone walls, her name was barely whispered, and when it was, it came with fear. Her mother died with blood on her lips. Her father, the most powerful man in England, refused to even look at her. Not because he didn't believe she was his, but because he did. She never wore a crown, never sat on a throne, yet her mere existence was treated like treason. She was watched, she was followed, and finally they tried to erase her. She had no army, no title, no voice in Parliament. But what she did have was blood, royal blood, the kind of blood that gets people killed in Tudor England. Why did Henry VIII, a man who defied the Pope, shattered centuries of tradition, and beheaded his own wives, fear this one girl so deeply? What secret did she carry that made even her breath feel dangerous? This is not just the story of a forgotten child. It's the tale of a kingdom that tried to bury her, and the terrifying reason why. This story is unlike anything you've heard. England in the early 16th century was a realm on the edge of transformation and collapse. King Henry VIII ruled not just with a golden scepter, but with a sharpened axe. His word was law, and his wrath could tear apart families' faith and entire nations. This was a world teetering between medieval superstition and Renaissance ambition. Power came not from votes or virtue, but from birthright marriage and how close you stood to the king. Religion was splintering. The Pope in Rome no longer held dominion over England, not since Henry, desperate for a male heir, had torn his kingdom from the Catholic Church to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. But with every break he made from the old world, Henry created new enemies abroad and within. Catholic Spain was watching. Protestant reformers were rising. Noble families with royal blood began calculating their chances. And inside this roaring storm, where alliances flipped overnight and accusations of treason whispered death, one fact remained constant. The throne of England was not safe, and neither were the people who might one day claim it. Henry V's obsession with legacy was legendary. He wanted sons. He needed sons. But the one child who came closest to giving him peace was a girl his legitimate daughter with Catherine, the future queen, Mary the Sirs. Yet even she had been cast aside for years, declared illegitimate and forced into exile from court. If that was the fate of a crowned princess, imagine the fate of an unwanted, unofficial, unacknowledged child. Now, history often tells us about Henry's 6 wives. Their fates divorced, beheaded died, divorced, beheaded survived, are taught in classrooms, sung in musicals, and immortalized in portraits. But what it often hides are the children born between those marriages. The quiet rumors, the daughters whose faces were never painted, the sons who died in infancy, and the one girl who wasn't supposed to exist, but did. She was likely born in the shadows between marriages. Her mother might have been a courtier, a maid, or someone higher lower we don't know. Her name doesn't appear in official registers. No baptism, no coat of arms, only fragments, only whispers. But those whispers terrified people in power, because those who knew of her, even in hushed tones, believed she was Henry's. And in a world where kings rewrote religion and replaced queens like chess pieces, an illegitimate daughter might seem harmless unless she looked too much like her father, unless she reminded people of the queen he had executed, unless she inspired loyalty or fear. Records from courtiers mention a dark-eyed girl with fire in her step, often escorted under heavy guard, never officially acknowledged, but never fully discarded, a living ghost within the palace walls. To understand why she became a target, we must understand Henry's psychology. He was not simply a ruler, he was a man possessed by legacy, tormented by insecurity, and haunted by the death of his sons. Each illegitimate child represented both shame and danger, a mistake from the past, and a spark for rebellion in the future. In a time when rebellion often began with a rumor of a child with royal blood raised in hiding, even the idea of a daughter who might one day challenge the line of succession was intolerable. She was not raised as a princess. She was not even granted the mercy of exile. Instead, she became a secret kept too long, until keeping her alive became the greater risk. And so the machinery of Tudor politics began to grind its slow, merciless gears. Whispers became orders, surveillance became isolation, and somewhere between the walls of Hampton Court and the Tower of London, a plan was set in motion not to kill her swiftly, but to erase her completely. The question is, how do you kill someone who isn't supposed to exist? She was 15 when someone made the mistake of noticing her. In a small manor outside of Kent, a young woman with unmistakable features, copper brown hair, sharp cheekbones a storm behind her eyes, was brought to court for questioning. Not formally, not publicly. No charges were read, no guards with trumpets or scrolls, just a carriage in the dead of night, and silence. The woman had been living under a different name. She had no title, no fortune. But someone somewhere had recognized something about her, the curve of her jaw, the way she carried herself, the way she spoke, without realizing she expected to be obeyed. It was enough. At first, they tried subtlety. She was given a protector, an older noblewoman, loyal to the crown, assigned to watch over her health, her conversations, her visitors. But it was surveillance cloaked in care. They watched who she spoke with, what she wrote, what books she read. Every scrap of correspondence she tried to send was intercepted. The girl known to most in the household as Ellyn didn't understand at first, but she was clever. She noticed the missing letters, the servants who were suddenly replaced, the coded glances, the way doors no longer opened as freely. Then came the visit. A man in velvet black, not a bishop, not a noble, not quite a soldier. He didn't give his name. He only asked her one question. Do you believe yourself to be the daughter of His Majesty? She said nothing, but her silence was not enough, because the real problem wasn't what she believed. It was what others might come to believe. Even in the shadows, Ellyn had begun to draw attention. A letter from a young poet referred to her as the child of wrath and fire. A nobleman whose wife had once served Anne Boleyn mentioned seeing a girl at a country estate who looked uncannily like the late queen. These were fragments, small things. But in the Tudor court, small things start wars, and it was Anne Boleyn who terrified them most. Anne the queen, who had enchanted Henry, split the nation, given birth to Elizabeth, and then died beneath the executioner's sword, accused of adultery, incest, and treason. Her name had not been spoken with kindness in years, but Ellyn had her eyes, her voice, the same sharp mind. Some whispered she was Anne's child, born in secret, hidden to protect her from her mother's downfall. If that were true, and if Henry were truly her father, then Ellyn wasn't just dangerous. She was a weapon waiting to be used by anyone bold enough to challenge the throne. Whispers turned to meetings. The Privy Council discussed her name behind closed doors, never written down, never declared. Her existence became the court's worst kept secret. Everyone knew, but no one dared say it aloud. And then the Lord Chancellor made a move. A visit was arranged under the pretext of inquiry into land disputes. Ellyn was to be questioned this time more forcefully, but the questioning never happened. The guards who arrived found her room empty bed still warm. She had vanished into a country torn by division between Catholics and Protestants north and south, loyalty and survival. Some believed she had been taken by allies of the old Boleyn family. Others claimed she fled with the help of Mary's supporters, hoping to pit sister against sister. There were rumors she crossed into Scotland or that she joined a convent under false papers. But the truth, she was still in England, hiding, watching, waiting. Letters began appearing, anonymous but distinct in their language, addressed to bishops, to barons, even to ambassadors. Letters that questioned the legitimacy of Henry's heirs. Letters that described a daughter forgotten, cast off, but not gone. The crown was livid. Every rumor now fueled rebellion. Every village that spoke her name, Ellyn, Ellena, even the cursed daughter, became suspect. A man was tortured in York for saying he'd seen her walking the hills. A midwife in Sussex was burned for claiming she'd once nursed the king's ghost child. Panic rose like smoke. Henry, now older, heavier, more paranoid than ever, issued no formal decree. But his advisers understood she must be found, and if she was found, she must disappear. But by then, Ellyn had become more than a girl. She had become a story, a symbol, a question that couldn't be unasked. What if she was real? What if the true heir to the Tudor legacy was not in court, but in hiding? And what if she didn't want the crown only to be heard? The net around her tightened. She couldn't stay in one place more than a week. Her allies dwindled, friends disappeared, but still she resisted, not with armies, not with speeches, but by staying alive. Each year she survived, she exposed the weakness of the kingdom, a monarchy so desperate to forget her that it would spend fortunes, shed blood, and destroy anyone who dared protect her. And then one winter evening, the silence ended. She was seen boarding a small ship on the southern coast, bound, it was believed, for Calais. But before the vessel could leave the harbor, it was stormed. No shots were fired, no bodies found, only the ship's captain unconscious, and a lock of hair left behind on the deck, dark curled, unmistakable. The crown announced she was dead, lost at sea, perished in flight. But no body was ever recovered, no tomb was built, and among the villagers of Dover, for years after, mothers would whisper to their daughters, "Be careful what you say. She's still listening." They said she drowned, that her ship went down in the channel, swallowed by the sea, like so many secrets of the Tudor court. But that was the version meant to end the story. The truth, what little we have, begins not with a storm, but with a prison. Not the Tower of London. That would have made her too visible, too permanent, too real. Instead, they chose a manor deep in the countryside, an old estate converted into what they called a safe house. No records, no visitors, no trial. She was brought there by covered cart wrists, bound but head held high. Witnesses, what few there were, recalled her face pale, bruised, but defiant. She did not scream. She did not beg. She walked on her own feet, though the guards clearly expected her to collapse. She had survived too much to collapse. Inside, the manor had been stripped bare. No windows that opened, no mirrors, no candles, just cold stone wood and silence. Her cell had no name, only a mark carved into the wall, a Tudor rose half burned. They never told her the charges. She was not allowed a priest, and she was never called by her name, only the girl. In the first few weeks, they tried kindness. A female servant offered warm broth in clean linen, but even that was strategy meant to confuse, to soften. When she asked where she was, the woman replied, "You're not anywhere anymore." Then came the questions. Night after night, a man arrived, always alone, cloaked face, shadowed voice, calm, too calm. He asked the same things, again and again. Who helped you? Where were you born? What is your name? Each time she said nothing, or worse, she answered with another question. Why does it matter if I'm no one? Why are you afraid of a girl with no crown? And then came the pain. They didn't torture her in the way we expect. No racks, no public whippings. That would have left evidence. No, what they did was slower, more careful, depriving her of sleep, keeping lights on for days, then plunging her into darkness, feeding her salt broth without water, moving her between rooms so she'd lose all sense of time. One account, smuggled from a guard who later fled England, describes a moment when she collapsed mid-step and hit the floor hard. She lay there, unmoving. They thought she'd died, but then she laughed. That laughter echoed down the hall like a curse. By month 3, she was nearly unrecognizable, thin, disoriented, but still not broken. One interrogator later said she stared at me like I was the ghost, and she the judge. And then came the final visit. This time there were 3 of them. One wore the ring of the Privy Council, another held a sealed scroll, the third a priest's silent pale there only to bear witness. They read her a proclamation, not aloud, to each other. Her fate had already been decided. She was to be removed in silence and committed to the will of God. No trial, no sentence, no defense. They gave her one night, not to pray, but to write. She was given ink and paper and left alone. What she wrote has never been found. The next morning at dawn, she was taken to the lower courtyard. A platform had been built hastily hidden behind a high wooden fence. No spectators, no ceremony, no name recorded. She was dressed in gray, not white, not black, gray the color of uncertainty. The executioner, likely imported for anonymity, did not speak. She climbed the steps on her own. Her hands trembled, but her spine stayed straight. When asked for final words, she said, "You can break a branch, but not the root." Then she knelt, but the blade didn't fall cleanly. The first swing caught the shoulder. She cried out not from fear, but fury. Her scream, they say, was like a wildfire. The second swing did it, and then there was silence. The guards buried her on sight. No marker, no record, only a shallow grave beneath a tree that no longer stands. Her body was never claimed. Her name never written in any book of death. But she did not vanish. 2 weeks later, a letter surfaced in Antwerp, unsigned, written in a woman's hand, describing the secret execution of a daughter of fire and shame. Within months, rebels across the north were whispering her name. Some claimed she had survived, that it was a servant who died in her place, that she lived in exile building an army, that she would return crowned not by law, but by vengeance. The court, now ruled by Henry's sickly son Edward, denied everything, but fear was already spreading, and fear in Tudor England was fuel. Years later, during Mary's reign, a royal advisor ordered all surviving records of Ellyn's captivity burned. Yet one page survived a torn piece of parchment discovered in the 19th century behind a church wall. On it, in faded ink, she would not weep, she would not kneel. She walked as if she knew the end and pitied us for it. History did not mourn her. No poets wrote elegies in her name, no stained glass bears her face, and no chapel in Westminster holds even a whisper of her memory. But her absence was deafening. In the years that followed her death or disappearance, her story became a curse to those who knew it. The guards who'd held her refused to speak of that winter again. The manor where she was kept fell into disrepair within a decade. The roof caved in as if trying to bury what it had seen. And yet, she lingered. In the margins of letters written by noblewomen, there are references to the girl whose name we dare not speak. In one journal, kept by a Catholic sympathizer during Elizabeth's reign, a faded line reads, "The true daughter died not in sin, but in silence, and still I hear her walking." By then, England had moved on. Mary had ruled in fire and fear. Elizabeth, another daughter Henry once declared illegitimate, had taken the throne and ushered in a golden age. But even she, powerful and adored, never once acknowledged the other girl, the one who might have been her sister, or her rival, or her mirror. Some say Elizabeth ordered the last remaining traces of Ellyn destroyed, not out of hatred, but fear, that by keeping her alive in memory she might be resurrected in rebellion, that ghosts once named become banners. And so Ellyn's story was erased, not in a single stroke, but over generations. Her letters, if they existed, were burned. Her name faded from family trees. Her mother, unknown and unnamed, was swallowed by the same darkness that took her daughter. All that remains now are shadows. A half-finished portrait, once attributed to Holbein, shows a young woman with no title, no crest. Her eyes are sharp, her hands clenched. It bears no label, but to those who've seen it, the resemblance is chilling. In the 1800s, a grave was found beneath a gnarled tree in the south of England. No inscription, just a lock of dark hair preserved in linen. A historian dared to suggest it might belong to Henry's lost child. The site was quickly closed, and nothing more was said. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of Ellyn, if that was her name, is the way she was forgotten. Because in Tudor England, the greatest threat to power wasn't a rival army. It was a story, a question that couldn't be answered, a bloodline that wouldn't stay buried. And she was all of those things. She was the daughter of fire and secrecy, a girl born in defiance, a woman who refused to kneel even when the world demanded it. She may not have worn a crown, but in the silence she left behind, we can still hear it falling. So was she truly Henry's daughter, a forgotten branch of the Tudor tree, cut down before it could bloom, or just a myth born from guilt and fear we may never know for sure. But in a world built on silence and power, perhaps that was always the point to leave us wondering. Because Ellyn's story is not just about lineage, it's about how history chooses who gets remembered and who must be erased. And if you thought this story was horrifying, wait until you hear what they did to Edward VI, the boy king who ruled too soon and died far too young under even darker shadows. Click here to uncover the next royal tragedy. And don't forget to subscribe, because in Tudor England, truth is always stranger than fiction.